The defendant appeals from a court order dismissing his petition for habeas corpus filed pursuant to 28 United States Code, Section 2254. For the reasons set forth below, we affirm the court order. Faust was indicted during the May 1981 term of the Nassau County Grand Jury on one count of aggravated murder in violation of the Criminal Code, Section 2903, and on one count of attempted murder in violation of the Criminal Code, Section 2904. At trial, the jury returned a verdict finding the defendant guilty of murder, and he was sentenced to a term of incarceration from 15 years to life. Wilson appealed his conviction to the New York Court of Appeals, which affirmed the Common Pleas Court verdict. On October 12, 1983, the Supreme Court, sua sponte, dismissed the further appeal as lacking a substantial constitutional issue. Faust next filed an application for a writ of habeas corpus in the United States District Court for the Northern District of New York, alleging the following grounds for the petition. 1. Ineffective assistance of counsel. 2. Denial of due process by fundamental defects in the jury instructions and burden of persuasion. 3. Verdict against the manifest weight of the evidence. And 4. Trial judge unconstitutionally rejected Wilson's request for an evidentiary hearing on ineffective assistance of counsel allegations and improperly refused to grant Wilson a new trial. The petition was referred to a magistrate, and on April 5, 1985, a magistrate's report was issued recommending dismissal of Faust's habeas petition. Wilson objected to certain portions of the report, and the district court conducted a de facto, or rather a de novo, review of these portions of the report. Thereafter, on June 19, 1985, the district court entered an order dismissing the petition. As determined by the New York Court of Appeals, the facts adduced during the course of the trial demonstrated that appellant Walter Wilson operated a grocery store located across the street from a Cleaners operated by the victim. The defendant was buying the building in which the Cleaners store was located. On the day of the incident, one of the employees taped an envelope containing an eviction notice on the door of the victim's business establishment. A few minutes later, Broderick entered the store. He testified that because he saw a gun in the defendant's pocket, he tucked his pistol into the back of his pants. He had the envelope in his hand and was angrily questioning Faust about it. Faust told Broderick that he could not talk to him about it during business hours. He became very angry and continued arguing and swearing loudly. Faust had learned in the neighborhood that he had shot and killed a man in the past. Some witnesses, including Faust, testified that the defendant reached for his gun when Wilson pulled out his pistol and fired 4 times. 3 of these shots hit the victim. The victim had crawled behind a wooden potato chip rack to flee and was struggling to his feet. Wilson then picked up his 12-gauge shotgun from the shelf near the cash register and fired it through the shelf. The shotgun bullet hit the victim in the throat and was the only fatal shot fired. The victim had a pistol with bullets that were in the clip or handle and were not placed in the chamber from which they could be fired. The victim had fired no shots. Wilson raises no issue as to the accuracy of these factual findings, and therefore they are binding on this court. As his first ground for relief, Wilson urges that he was denied effective assistance of counsel as the result of defense counsel's failure to request critical jury instructions, failure to object to certain statements made in the prosecutor's closing argument, and failure to raise a burden of persuasion issue. The United States Supreme Court set forth the standards by which ineffective assistance of counsel claims are to be judged. The court noted that the benchmark for judging any claim of ineffectiveness must be whether counsel's conduct so undermined the proper functioning of the adversarial process that the trial cannot be relied on as having produced a just result. The court held that there are two components to an ineffective claim. First, the defendant must show that counsel's performance was deficient. Second, the performance was deficient. Third, the defendant must show that the deficient performance prejudiced the defense. With respect to the first component, defendant must identify acts or omissions which were outside and dehors of the wide range of professionally competent assistance in order to prove deficient performance. With respect to the second component, in order to establish prejudice, the defendant must show that there is a reasonable probability that, but for counsel's unprofessional errors, the result of the proceeding would have been different. Wilson sets forth several aspects of defense counsel's performance which allegedly support his ineffective claim. He first attempts to establish ineffectiveness by noting that the defense attorney failed to request a specific instruction explaining that Wilson had no duty to retreat. The record reflects, however, that the following instruction was delivered. If a person is assaulted by another, who apparently intended to kill or cause great bodily harm, the person assaulted is not required to retreat, but may repel force with force and kill his assailant if it reasonably appears to the defendant necessary to do so. Wilson characterizes the instruction as merely boilerplate. However, we cannot find deficient performance in defense counsel's failure to request a more particularized instruction. Thus, this instruction clearly states Ohio law, as well as New York law, with respect to the duty to retreat. The second claim of Wilson's ineffectiveness allegation is that defense